My name is Chris Savage. I work with the NIA on industrial and particularly supply chain issues. I'm going to talk mainly about the implications of the new build programme and particularly the implications for the supply chain. What I want to do is to try and bring out some issues about the way the programme is developing and hope you'll be able to draw some inferences about what that means for the role of quality professionals in the industry. In nuclear, as in any other industry, the role of quality is shaped by two drivers. There's both commercial and regulatory drivers. And the intention is to allow the strategic issues about the programme to be resolved at the level of government in advance of the programme proceeding, to facilitate, first of all, planning applications, and secondly, the investment decisions to be taken. So that what it's trying to do is to take out of, for example, out of the planning process, the big issues that have previously bedeviled nuclear planning applications of whether nuclear is safe, whether the designs are safe, whether nuclear is necessary, and to resolve those at national level so that people can enter the planning system with a degree of confidence and that investment decisions can be taken. And they'll help to facilitate long-term investment and operation by giving a long-term stable market for energy pricing, which would be conducive to those long-term investment decisions. So it gives confidence for the planning process. It gives confidence once plants start operating that they can be operated commercially and profitably. The gap in the middle is the construction risk, is the challenge of actually building this fleet of power stations on time and on budget. The programme will roll out. It will start with EDF's investment in Hinkley, 2 power stations in Hinkley, both EPRs, and then a further 2 at Sizewell in Suffolk, followed by Horizon building in Wilfer on Anglesey. Horizon hasn't yet decided which technology it's going to choose, EPR or AP1000. That decision is expected before the end of this year. Followed by the next Horizon one in Oldbury, and then finally NewGen up in Cumbria. So we've got a sort of rollout of a programme, starting with Hinkley, going over roughly a decade. Each of these power stations will be the size of the Olympics. So it's each of them Olympics in its own right in terms of scale and cost. Actually, they're rather more complex than that. I mean, the Olympics is a simple construction process, has been delivered very effectively, but it has nowhere near the complexities of building a nuclear power station. The licensee developer will, at the top of the supply chain, will have all the responsibility as licensee for the whole of the supply chain. What I refer to as Tier 1 suppliers below that, primarily the reactor vendors. In this case, it's Areva with its EPR technology and Westinghouse with its AP1000 technology. And in practice, the Tier 1s will manage much of the contracting for the tiers below them, the larger Tier 2 companies, and then Tier 3s and 4s, which are the smaller companies supplying them on a subcontract basis. So in effect, the Tier 1s will have most of the contracting responsibility down to the supply chain, but the responsibility for supply chain quality and safety will rest at the top with the licensee, and that will require a process of regular audit right down through the supply chain, both by the licensee and by ONR. What we've got here is a very large supply chain with the licensees having primary responsibility in their individual projects for the whole of that supply chain, and they can't delegate that. The regulatory and safety responsibility lies with them. So the scale of this exercise is enormous, particularly bearing in mind that it's a common supply chain for each of them. So the same suppliers will be applying, very largely supplying each of these projects. So it's a big challenge about resources across the industry, not least of which a challenge of regulatory resource, incidentally. That rollout raises a number of other issues. One is the interaction between the different projects and whether the competition for resources, but the timing of each of these projects is going to have an impact. There are big questions about supply chain capability, not just for the nuclear-specific elements of the programme, but outside that. So coming back to engineering, construction, civil engineering, and mechanical engineering, more generally. And the ONR has a particular concern that it wants to raise standards across the nuclear estate, not just in new build, but in decommissioning, in operation, and defence as well. And it's not just about common standards for the sake of it, but about raising standards across industry and how we do that. And there is some greater attention now being paid to this question I came back to earlier on, the sort of gap about how we resolve the construction risk in this, and in particular about how we look at the challenge of delivering the fleet as a whole by programme managing the whole of the exercise and understanding how these different parts interact. What this comes back to is the point I started, which is that there is the commercial driver for quality will become more and more important as we enter the construction phase, and ensuring that the supply chain, not just in nuclear but down through the whole of the supply chain, is able to deliver on a high quality, right first time, competitive basis, will be key to ensuring that this programme is delivered on time and on budget.